All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to another episode of Spring Office Hours. I'm your host, Dan Vega. With me, as always, my friend DaShaun. How are you?
I'm super. I'm jacked. I'm
Jack.
excited about today's show. We got lots of great stuff.
We do. We have a lot to get to today. We're calling this one the AOT episode. So we are going to talk about ahead of time compilation, formerly known as Spring Native. So we'll get into a lot of that. We have some demos. We have lots to talk about today. Where do you want to start, DaShaun?
Well, where we like to start is the calendar. There's so much stuff, and sometimes it's hard to keep track of like what's going on and knowing what's coming around the corner and what's the new cool way of doing things. So yeah, like normal, let's jump into the calendar and see what's coming.
Okay, sounds good to me. Let's go ahead and share my screen. So we are looking at calendar.spring.io for anyone who's joining us for the first time. This is a really good reference for you, a resource to go ahead and look at kind of what we have in the Spring ecosystem as far as releases go. It gives you a good idea of where we are with things. So today is Tuesday, October 4th, in case you're watching the replay. And so what we like to do is just kind of look at what's happening this week. So yesterday we had Spring Cloud Data Flow release. Today we have Spring Batch. So we have a milestone 7 there. I'm guessing as we're kind of working towards Spring Framework 6 and Spring Boot 3, a lot of these milestone releases are trying to catch up with that. We have Spring Shell 2.1.2 and Spring Shell 3.0.0 milestone 1. So again, that milestone 1 is probably to catch up with Spring Boot 3. Spring Shell, I'm not sure what's new in here, but as we've talked about on this show a couple of times, I'm really interested in this project. DaShaun and I were looking at something he built yesterday to kind of help us. Just a little like command line tool that you use to generate some information for this show. So I know you're a big fan of that project.
So yeah, and to connect the dots, one of the things that I was trying to do yesterday, and that project's public. I made a repository. I'll put it in the show notes for it's just a CLI that allows us to create a new show. To show, hey, who's the guest? What are we talking about? And it's building the images that we use for our streams and all the stuff, the images that we use, and it creates it. And publishes it for us. But one of the things I was trying to do is make that into a native binary. Make it so that, hey, I can install that on my laptop, and so that Dan can install it on his laptop. And one of the things that I ran into is pulling in the fonts, pulling in the images into that native binary, and I'm stuck. And we're going to talk about that hopefully tomorrow on code, but you can join us. I'm going to grab in the latest version of the Spring Shell, and we'll see if that maybe can help me out. See if it provided me some hints so I can make that native image that will include some of those resources into my native image binary.
Cool.
So yeah,
Yep.
connect the dots right there.
That's awesome. And you kind of inspired me for what I want to do. So I produce a newsletter. I write my newsletter in a tool called Notion because it's a familiar environment for me. I don't as much as I like writing code in editors, I don't like writing text or like blog posts. I used to write all my blog posts in like an editor, like Visual Studio Code. I just can't do it anymore. I like the light theme of Notion. I like the fact that I get, spell check. Grammarly is plugged into that, so I get some assistance there. I like the kind of professional writing environment. So I write in Notion, and then what happens is I end up pushing my newsletter from Notion into a code version, which gets posted on my website, and then into a version on ConvertKit, which goes out to my email subscriber list. And so it's a very drawn out process, and it shouldn't be. And so you inspired me that what I want to do is use Spring Shell to create this really nice tool that does all that for me. And I'm really looking forward to getting to that. We just have so many priorities right now that it's kind of taking a back seat. But I'm definitely going to be hitting you up when I can get to that.
Um, yeah, and as you say, I inspired you. Our good friend Josh inspired me. Automate all the things, and we can do so much more today with Spring than we could. And Spring Native and the things that are coming with Spring Framework 6 and Spring Boot 3, those are exciting. I can get rid of a bunch of these other one-off projects, and I can bring it all into my favorite framework, my favorite language with Spring Framework
And
6, Spring Boot 3.
I think that's a really great point too, because people say, well, why would you use Spring Shell to write a command line app? And my answer would be, why wouldn't you? Like, I don't I know enough Bash to be dangerous, but anytime I got to do anything outside of like the norm in Bash, I got to go look stuff up, and I'm just like, it's not code that I write every day.
Let me see if I've
So
got. I don't think I have anything on here that I can do. But the other thing about Spring Shell, the things that I've done in Bash, those one-off scripts that we've written in
yeah,
Bash to do the things just like you talked about,
yeah,
they never looked so good as what you get. Spring Shell, again, it's a batteries included type of framework. It's a batteries
right.
included thing where it gives you a help menu, it gives you context, and it
Hmm.
gives you auto completion, all that things built in.
Hmm.
So the
And
things that you build with it are going to be just that much better
right.
production grade.
And you get to reuse like some code or some logic that you've already done. Like I said, I've
Oh yeah.
written apps in Spring that have used something like a REST template or a web client to connect to Notion and pull that information down. If I wrote a bash script, I would be starting from like ground zero on that
Yes.
and Googling all the things to try to figure out how to do that. So yeah, I think it's just nice to be in a familiar environment. So
Absolutely. I have to just give a quick shout out to Me Too. I don't have nearly as many followers as you do, Dan. But Me Too is somebody who's like stayed up late with me while we're hacking through
nice.
open source PRs. Super awesome to see. Thank you. And also, Chrissy, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate you guys joining us.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. I see another comment there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
I get to bring all of those things, all of those one-off things. I get to bring them into my comfort zone, my
Hmm.
my favorite language. Yeah, who wants to go and relearn Bash for that one-off thing when I could do it in Spring?
Yep.
And I'm starting to get back. I'm starting to get that muscle memory back. I just before the show I did a stream, and we pushed out updates to some Terraform that I got from our counterpart Lee.
Nice.
He helped me get through my Oracle ARM image issues. Then I went and validated. I I created a newer version of the ARM64 builder, so that I can build native images for ARM64 devices. And we pushed that out. We validated. We did it on stream and we pushed it out. I've done a lot of stuff, and I'm starting to get my muscle memory back, and I'm starting to want those path to production, those pipelines, those automations. I'm starting to want those more and more. I'm getting the need and the desire, and actually I'm getting value out of it. And I'm pretty sure we're going to start talking about some of those things next week. Like, how do you get Spring to production? So just looking forward, we should probably put that on the calendar. Looking forward a little bit. Next week, join us for Spring to production on office hours.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be. I'm really looking forward to that. We talked yesterday about that, and this is gonna that kind of topic is going to be something we talk about, more and more in the future. But just giving folks a sense of like, hey, I have this app, and this is the type of environment I'm in. How do I get this to production? So there are a bunch of options, and we'll look at a couple next week and talk about a lot of the options. So looking forward to that. Just to wrap up the calendar here, Spring Cloud release 2022, milestone 5. So some exciting things there. We have some exciting releases coming up next week that I'm looking forward to talk about, including this one right here, Spring Framework 6.0 RC release candidate 1. Wow, that's awesome. And then if we look down here, oh my gosh, another RC1. So some exciting things happening in the Spring Framework 6, Spring Boot 3 world. We're getting closer and closer to November. So we have some release candidates coming out, which is exciting.
I couldn't wait. I couldn't wait. So the other thing I did today was I upgraded some of my local things from Spring Boot 3 Milestone 4 to Spring Boot 3 Milestone 5, which I think came out last week.
Yep.
I can't wait. I can't wait for these things. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be fun.
Take it for a spin.
And yeah, go ahead and like DaShaun said, pull down the latest, take it for a spin, run into some problems. If you have any, ask us the questions. We'll see if we can't help or put some demos around that. I'm interested in putting some things together around kind of those releases. So let us know. We have a couple things here. Okay, so tomorrow I will port my prod Spring Shell application to 3.0.
Yes.
Nice.
Absolutely. Take it. Remember, I think it's a milestone release, right? The Spring Shell.
Yes.
Yes.
It's a milestone.
But I mean, I surround myself with people. I personally, I've surrounded myself with people, and I myself, I make my career out of career limiting decisions. Take a milestone to prod. If it works, it works. Your tests are going to validate that it works.
Yep. All right, we have a question. Can we use private registry for pulling base images for BuildPox instead of Bellsoft?
Yes. Let's hold off on that. I saw both of those questions. Let's hold off on that for a little bit because I'm going to get into some of that, and I will address those for sure.
And let's the CI/CD one we'll come back to. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Well, me too. Yeah. CI/CD. That's what we're talking about. You're going to want to come back next week for that one.
Okay. Cool. So that is the release calendar. I want to mention just a couple quick updates. If you follow Spring Central on Twitter, you already saw this. If you don't, what are you waiting for? You should follow this account. But it's here. The State of Spring Survey 2022 is now open. This is a chance for you to kind of share your feedback as far as where Spring is, where it's going, what you like, what you don't like. We use this information, we take it to heart. So please go ahead and take this survey if you have a few minutes. It would really help us out. Spring 1. Wow, we're getting closer and closer. What is today's date? The 3rd? Oh my gosh, we're like 2 months away from this. That is crazy. So Spring 1 is happening December 6th through the 8th, 2022 in San Francisco. We are back in person. We have a whole bunch of speakers and sessions listed here. So if you go into speakers, you can see them. If you go into workshops, you can see workshops. And this first one here, getting started with Spring Boot, Dan and DaShaun. So if you're going to be at Spring 1 and you want to learn how to get started with Spring Boot, this is a perfect time to do so. Perfect workshop for that.
You know what I just see? A better path to production with Spring Boot. Man, I feel like
Ooh,
maybe we should bring Tiffany on our show next week.
maybe that would be a good idea. We are
Hey, it couldn't
talking
hurt.
path to production.
Couldn't
We'll
hurt.
see if we can ask her and see what her plans are. So,
Let me take a note.
spring one, we have a code somewhere. I'll have to find it. I don't have it offhand, but we will get
Uh,
that in the show notes.
Let me see if I can find it while you keep
That
going.
is, this code will give you $200 off. So, I mean, who doesn't like free money? So we hope to see all of you at Spring One. Just cannot wait. I know I'm giving us a regular session. I'm giving a
Wait,
workshop.
didn't you put the code in your newsletter?
Yes, it's in the newsletter somewhere. I think last week's newsletter.
Yeah, it
So
is.
I'll show that in a
I'll
second.
go look and then I'll throw it into the chat.
So I'm looking forward to presenting, but I'm looking forward to just this list of speakers that we have. Just so many amazing speakers, so many amazing sessions. I can't wait to learn from all of these amazing people. It's just insane how many great speakers we're going to have there. So looking forward to that. On that topic, also in my newsletter, I talked about it this week, but I got accepted to Code Mash for 2 talks, one of which I'll be sharing the stage with Mr. DaShaun. We are doing a similar talk about the workshop that we're doing at Spring One, but this is a couple more hours. So we are doing, if you're in the Ohio area, near Ohio, this is at Kalahari Resort, cool water park, really great conference, just a really good mix of all kinds of different topics. I really enjoy I mean, it's a Midwest thing. I enjoy the people that come to this conference. Everybody's so friendly, just a really great conference. So, Code Mash 2023 happening January of next year. If you are able to join us there, that would be awesome.
I'll be there.
I have some stuff on Learning Spring, but we'll talk about that in another episode. Check out the Spring blog to get caught up on everything happening spring. And finally, I want to talk about some guides. So there are a couple new guides in here. The first one is the spring dependency injection that me and my coworker Mario did. So Mario and I put together kind of an introduction to dependency injection in Spring. So if that's something that's new to you, this is a really good, like, what is it? Why should I care about it? How do I do it? And it's a guide. So it'll give you some basic intro, but then it'll get into like, okay, how do I do this? Let's walk through, build a project together, and understand the pitfalls of not using dependency injection, and then how dependency injection works in Spring. So uh, really had a good time working on this with Mario. I think it turned out great. So go ahead and check that out. Again, the Tanzu Developer Center has a whole bunch of free guides. And then there's another one on here somewhere. If we were to go ahead and look for Graal VM, I think this one was written by DaShaun. DaShaun, you're on mute.
And the microphone. This is it took a long time to get out, and I apologize for that, but it's been fun. And yeah, can I dig into this a little bit? Is that
Yeah,
all
for
right?
sure. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Here, I'm gonna grab the screen
All right.
and let's go. Hey, look at that. I was in the exact same spot. This is getting started with GraalVM. The main idea here is that you can install. We show you how to install uh, the GraalVM with using SDKman and installing those native image extensions. But then there's actually kind of two modes. You can use the GraalVM, which is just another JVM, JDK. You can use that without doing anything else. It's actually a really, really good JDK/JVM. And you can take your normal projects and you can do a side by side. And I think for a lot of projects, you're going to see some performance benefits just by switching to the GraalVM. And what we're doing here is I'll show you, hey, you can use that Graal version of the JDK of version 17, and you can build a Spring Boot app, and then you can go and run it using that JVM, using just-in-time compiling, just like you're used to today. And for those that are they've been hearing about it. I saw a question over on the Spring developers community on Twitter just a little bit ago. They're wondering, like, I keep hearing about GraalVM, but what does that mean? It's just a better JVM. It's got some cool stuff, and one of the things that it does is It provides ahead of time compilation. So I show you how to do things with ahead of time compilation using Spring Boot. And, you know, TLDR, your build is going to run much faster. Here it's 0.152 seconds for it to initialize. And with just-in-time compiling, it took just over a second. That was on a different machine that we're going to use today, but the idea is the same. There are some trade-offs though, and that's what we're going to get into today.
So I saw that same question. For people who didn't see that question,
We can pull it up.
I think it's worth mentioning that what is a native executable? Because people hear Spring native, native executable. What the heck is that? Why do we care about a native executable versus what are we doing currently today when we build something?
Here's the question. I keep hearing about Graal VM. It says native image for cloud native and such, but I'm still confused. What does it mean exactly when one says native Java or cloud native? Those are a little bit overlapping, but let's try to address that.
Yep.
Let's try to address that. Push this back over here. When I'm running just in time, so this first example, when I'm doing that, what I'm generating is a jar file. I'm compiling Java into bytecode. And down here, I see I get a jar file here. I packaged it, I get a jar file, and it's about 19 megs. That 19 megs of bytecode can be run on any JVM. That's how Java works. Remember, the write once, run anywhere. I can take that 19 megabytes of bytecode and I can deliver it anywhere. The magic of Spring Boot, it puts everything I need into that jar file. We get this Uber jar that has all the dependencies. Everything I need is in that 19 megs, including the Tomcat, the embedded Tomcat runnable. So I get all of that in this little 19 megs. And back in the day, that was a big deal to have that one artifact that could be ran on different infrastructure, different JVMs, different operating systems and CPUs. I can run that jar file on an ARM64 JVM. As long as there's an ARM64 JVM, I can take that bytecode and the JVM will convert it to what it needs to run locally. But the JVM also provides a lot of other benefits. One of the other cool things that we always hear about is that the JVM has intelligence built into it. It can optimize your code when it sees like, hey, you're on this branch of that if statement 99.99% of the time. Let's optimize for that part of the code. Let's put that part as the first check in that if else, for example. It can make changes at runtime based on what it sees, based on its behavior. This is another example where that same 19 meg jar file behaved one way in the United States and it behaved an entirely different way in Europe because those if else checks were based on the language preference, optimized in one way for the United States and optimized a totally different way where there's different options in Europe. But the JVM took care of that. The JVM optimized for where it was running. So the users were getting an experience that was best for them in their region, just as an example. So what does that mean? What does this native compilation mean? Well, the native is saying, we're going to take everything that we need from the JVM and we're going to throw it into this statically linked binary. Everything that it needs is going to be in this one file. But one of the trade-offs is that one file, that statically linked native file, will only be able to run on the same CPU and operating system infrastructure. So if I jump right in and we talk about this a little bit, I'm going to, in this case, if you want to do it with Spring Boot 2.7.3, go and jump into the guide. Right now, I'm going to jump into an example. It's very similar using the latest version of Spring Boot. We're going to use the milestone version. Okay, so all I'm doing here is I'm hitting the endpoint of the initializer. I can kind of show where that's at just for those that don't know. Start@spring.io. Effectively, I'm hitting this, filling in some values, and adding a couple of dependencies. Those dependencies are the web and actuator. So now I've got a project. I can do this. Go take a look. It's super simple. It's very simple, very similar to what we've done in the guide. All I've done for the endpoint that we're going to test against is I added the actuator, and the actuator provides a health endpoint. So typical project. That's it. There's nothing special here. The only thing that we've done is we let Spring Boot and Spring Initializer tell us what do we need in our project. I gave it some names, but again, we're using Spring Boot 3, Milestone 5. I added the actuator and the web, and those dependencies have everything that they need to do their job. That's it. What you don't see here that you would have seen in 2.7.3 is you don't see an extra profile. That profile for native compilation is provided by the parent. So it's already included. You don't need to do anything else extra. So what does that mean, DaShaun? That means just-in-time compiling, MBNW, Spring, Boot, Run. Just like my normal JVM. Oh, I have something running on Docker PS. Let's do Docker stop guy. Apologies, that was from the previous stream. Let's Docker remove that guy just because we might want to do something else here. Okay, we're good. So let's do our Maven run again. Just-in-time compiling. Not doing anything real fancy here. It started up in 0.918 seconds. I am on an M1 machine. So this is an ARM64. It has a Rosetta and all that good stuff, but our app is up and running. I can jump back here and I can go take a look. So that's the application. I want you to see here, completed initialization in 1 millisecond. I said, hey, yep, cool. I'm up and running. And I took care of that request that you just sent, that request to actuator. It handled it. Cool. Is there any questions about that? So that's normal. Like we didn't do anything different. We went to start.spring.io, our favorite place. We built a project and we started it. The only difference is, let me scoot back here. The only difference is my Java version. I'm using the Groll VM. So no difference. Just like you're using Hotspot or others, there you go. But what we're going to do now is we're going to say, hey, I want this native. I want to see how fast it can go. Do we see how fast it started up? What did I say? 0.918, which is super duper fast. It's still a Spring Boot app. We didn't do native compilation. That jar file with this JVM started up in less than a second. And these are the improvements. This is Spring Boot 3, faster. You can see that this using 2.7, we were starting up in almost 2 seconds, 1.8 seconds. But that's quite a big difference. The other thing that we can do here in MBNW, I can create a statically linked binary. Do this clean package. I'm going to use that native profile. Say, hey, yeah, I want this to be native. And for my operating system, which is Darwin, this is a Mac, but it's also M1, so it's going to do it for this ARM64 architecture. And I'm going to do this skip test. And this is going to take about a minute. And that's one of the other trade-offs. Because what this is doing, it can't optimize at runtime, right? That's one of the big strengths of Java and of Spring is you can do things at runtime. We can change things. I can look at the class path. What ahead of time compilation needs to do is it needs to look at all of the executables. It needs to look at every path that it can possibly get to and determine what could possibly happen. So it's got to look at all the different branches of the code that are available, and it has to try to determine what that looks like. And then it'll optimize for all of those branches. It will build it natively for Darwin, for ARM64, and it'll statically link, it'll combine everything it needs into one binary image, binary file, binary executable. So we're not talking about OCI images at this point. So that's going to take about a minute on this machine. So I'm going to scoot over here and I'm going to look for questions. Hey, Keith, welcome to the show. We're talking about ahead of time compilation. I think I just heard my kids coming in, which shouldn't happen. Oh, that's my youngest ones. And moving away from, I'm going to look at some of these questions here. We got the developer code, so let's show that for, going back to what we were doing earlier. let me jump up here to the first question. Why does build image depend on Docker daemon to build? How to build OCI image independent of Docker via build packs. Let's jump into that question next. So I'm going to jump back over to our build. It took 1 minute and 16 seconds, and I'm going to holler downstairs. Let my kids know that I'm on a stream. Please hold.
All right. Just one more quick one more quick putting this up there. But yeah, use that code for Spring One. Gives you $200 off. Go ahead and use that.
All right, our binary. We used GraalVM. We used ahead of time compiling for that exact same Spring Boot project. But now I'm not gonna run it with a JVM. I'm going to run it. What did I call it? AOT. I'm going to run that file. Let's do this. Let's look at it. Take a look at what that looks like. This file is a 70 meg file, but it's just one file. And again, it's a binary. It has everything it needs, including everything it needs from the JVM to execute that Spring project. So all the bytecode, all the stuff that you get from the bytecode, including all the stuff that the JVM would do, the garbage collection, all of that memory, what it's doing is putting it all into this 70 megabyte file. And we can run that 70 megabyte file, and it'll start up in 0.058 seconds. So, I mean, what was this one? Let's go back up. It was like 0.9. Where is it? Did I go too far? Here you go. 0.918 using the JVM and 0.058. Much faster. And we're talking like milliseconds here, but hundreds of milliseconds faster. And today, like latency is the new downtime. And if you're doing serverless workloads, if the time where this thing is only going to be ran once, right? It's your enterprise grade hello world. It still works. So I'm going to refresh. I'm going to hit that same endpoint. It worked. Status is up. And down here, look, hey, I answered that call in 1 millisecond. It still responds. It's still doing the exact same thing that it did before. But now I don't need a JVM. I can run it anywhere that I have a Darwin ARM64 machine. I can take that file and I can run it. The trade-off was the amount of time it took to build. So maybe not the best idea to be doing this for your local development, but you can. If you got a fast machine, it only takes a minute. Like, is that really that big of a deal? But that trade-off results in, let's take a look at one of the other things again. I didn't do the before, but I can do this. I'm going to grab this PID. That's the process that's running this application. And I can do VM app with that PID. And I know that I want to pipe grep for the physical. It's only using 44 megs of memory. So in the cloud, where you pay for everything on somebody else's computer, that can be a pretty significant savings. Let's jump back and let's do this again, because I didn't do that before. MNW, I'm going to do this clean, Spring boot, Spring dash boot, run. Cool, didn't take that long. Again, that trade-off, that minute of ahead of time compilation doing all the things, this build only took 4 seconds. I'm going to grab that PID, and I'm going to go over here. I'm going to replace it. Oh, 112, 123 footprint peak. That's a pretty significant difference if you're paying for cloud resources. And locally on my machine, 44 versus 123 doesn't make that big of a difference. But at scale, if you're running tens of thousands of these or hundreds of thousands of these, and you're paying for resources like RAM, it makes all the difference in the world. So you're looking and you're like, hey, what does that mean? Like, should I be doing it? Right? Like our community tweet from Goldcrest. Like, what does that mean? Well, this is one of the things that it means. It means I could take that same enterprise grade Hello World app, I can have it behave the exact same way. I can use all of the things that I know about Spring. I have my comfortable framework. I can do all the things and have access to the entire Spring ecosystem that has been maturing for 20 plus years. I can have all of that and I can deploy it into the cloud for less than half of what it costs to deploy today.
DaShaun, can you bump up the screen size on that
Here,
terminal? Thank you.
44 is what it was natively compiled, and 112, 123 peak is what it was using the JVM. So if you Dan, you went to your boss and you said, hey, I can save us half, right? Over half. I can save us half of what we're spending on our cloud. Do you think that we get a high five?
Yeah, and this is like the most basic example of an application you can create. So imagine the savings on a real world application.
Right. So that's the big difference. Now, let me get back to
I just want to throw something in there real quick
yeah.
too. The engineering feat of GraalVM and the work that's gone into Spring to take all of this code and compile it down to native code is just, I want the mind blowing emoji right now. Just crazy of how, yeah, of how just, I mean, and we get all this for free, right? Just so cool. I love
yes.
it. Yes, mind blowing. Just really hats off to the GraalVM team, to the Spring team. Again, one of the biggest engineering feats the Spring team has had to undertake across all of the projects to make this native stuff work. So cool to see.
In the guide, I really look at the GraalVM. There's so much more to it, and you can actually do the same thing for other languages. It's not just for Java. But from the Java perspective, it's really the GraalVM provides kind of two modes: that just-in-time compiling and that ahead-of-time compiling. And what are you supposed to do with that? Like, how do I get the value if I'm testing it locally? What about when it gets to production? How do you do all those things? I'm going to say this: if you've got well-written tests today, you are at a huge advantage because you can use those tests to exercise your native binary. You can exercise it better than those that don't. And you can give yourself that confidence. Hey, this is going to work. The GraalVM's actually been around for a long time. So you can find out more about it here, graalvm.org. But really, for today, I want you to think of that GraalVM as you get two modes: that just-in-time compiling, where it's just like any other JVM, JDK combination. But then you also get this ahead-of-time compilation that will go through all of the code, execute it, and will convert it to that native for your operating system and architecture statically linked binary.
There's a question there. Do you think build times will get faster in the future?
I can say yes, and I can say that because even in the guide, I think that in this guide, I think I did the build, or maybe I didn't. I think the build took me, oh, here we go. It generated in 5 minutes and 23 seconds. So that's with Spring 2.7.3 and Spring Native that you can use in the guide. 5 minutes and 23 seconds. It was on a different machine, but our build, it's the exact same application. So let me make that clear. It's the exact same application, but we've switched a couple of things. We switched to an M1, we switched to Spring Boot 3, and that's it. That's the only changes. So this 5-minute build time, we changed the computer and we changed the Spring Boot version, and that 5-minute build time is down to it was 1 minute and 6 or whatever it was.
So
yes,
the build times are the build time improvement. They're both in GraalVM and Spring Boot then?
Yes.
Okay.
The combination, right?
Cool.
What Spring Native was doing was providing hints to GraalVM to say, hey, we do some interesting things, some dependency injection. We do some class path things. What the Spring Native extension was doing, it was saying, hey, Graal VM, you might want to look over here. And it was providing hints to the Graal VM.
Mhm.
And what Spring Boot 3 and Spring Framework 6, of course, have done is they've taken all of those hints and they're providing those hints out of the box. You get those hints provided. So it's those hints that are providing the speed ups that we're going to see with the Graal VM. There are. Oh, I'm so happy that Tutor Ted is here. And for those of you that don't know, Ted is amazing. He's an amazing practitioner. We are lucky to have him here. We switched our time for Ted so that we could get some people from the different areas to join the show. But yes, definitely check out his stuff. Thank you for joining the show. I'm going to jump back to our question. Like, hey, why does build image depend on Docker daemon? What I did here was, let me just close that one. I ran Maven plugin. That's Spring Boot. That's the Maven plugin. When I did run, it said, hey, just go and execute it. It does the build and it runs that jar file. This part, build image, I can do. And I'm actually going to do this p native. Yeah, we'll do that as well. What this is going to do, it's going to generate a OCI container image. But what it's using to do that, this is interesting. I haven't done this yet. Let's see if it works. What this is going to do, and the reason I say that is because we are using the build image, but I'm on ARM64. So I haven't done this, but that's what that other project is. So let's just see if this works. We're going to build an OCI compliant image. And what it's doing is it's grabbing the builder, and that builder is going to be defined in our parent project. So let's take a quick peek while that's running. I should be able to, how do I jump to the parent here? Boop. And we can see that this is the parent project of those dependencies. And let's see if I have my profile in here. I don't know where the profile lives. Let's see if I've got the, so it's not. So it's in a different POM. I want to get to the parent POM. I should be able to do it down here. External libraries, Spring Boot, here. No? How do I get to the parent POM file?
Can you command click Spring Boot parent?
Look at you. Yes, command click. And I should now see my profile that we used to get from the initializer. Here it is. That's that profile I was talking about. Again, we have the Maven plugin, but when we use that profile, the Maven plugin, where is the builder defined? Oh, it doesn't define one. It's just going to use whatever it gets, right? Let's see.
Yeah, and if you look in your Maven tab over on the right, it does define those process AOT. I think it's process. And so if you look under plugins, and then Spring Boot,
all the things.
It does have, the two goals there, process AOT and process test AOT.
So it didn't define a builder. So it's going to use its defaults. And I believe we can see it here. It says, hey, I see that you're trying to do a Java project. You're using Spring. It's going to grab all of the builders that qualify. It says, no, where does it identify the builders? It's doing native automatically. So it is doing native, but somewhere it says, hey, it's going to run through the code and it's going to say, hey, I see that you've got this stuff. And that's all defined here as part of the build pack process. Buildpacks.io. Build packs are amazing. Long ago, Heroku came out with some build packs, and then later uh, the team at Cloud Foundry uh, introduced some build packs, but they weren't compatible. And I think it was 2018. Look at here, we got this nice little link. They said, "Hey, let's work together and let's create a build pack that we can all use and agree upon." And it's got a lot of cool features. It actually shows you. There's a tutorial here on how to get started with build packs. And there's steps, there's a life cycle. And what build packs do is they can look at code. They have I don't remember what the phase is called, but they will look to say, like, hey, do you have this file? Do you have a pom.xml file? And if you do, we can see that you would like the Maven build pack, and we'll use this Maven build pack to do the Maven-y things. Or if you've got a Gradle.build, we'll use the Gradle build pack to do the Gradle-y things. But you can also do other languages, just like the Graal VM. We can use build packs for other languages, and I'm always going to give a shout out to GitHub.com, Sean, COBOL build pack. I made a build pack for COBOL, like those steps. And in those steps, we identify somewhere and say, hey, if you see this kind of file, then it's COBOL. But that's what we're doing. So that's how the build packs are working, is they've identified it and they go down and they pull down these, the builder is pulling down these build packs to generate this OCI compliant image. That is why we have to use Docker in order to build the image. So is there a way around that? Can I do something besides Docker? You can do this process without Docker per se. You can use the other tools, and the name is escaping me. Containerd, sorry, to do that. But you have to have something that can run those OCI images that are the build packs. You have to have something that can run those in order to do the build pack things. And that's how it's generating that OCI compliant image. So hopefully that answered this first question. You can, how do I build OCI images independent of Docker via build packs? I can build the native image. Let me go back here. I built that native binary. I can do that without Docker, without build packs. But I don't know that I can build an OCI image without the use of Docker. Hopefully that makes sense.
I mean, you could on your own, right? Like, I mean, you can go from scratch and
yeah,
figure that out.
Right, because an OCI image is just a tar file.
Right.
So yeah, the answer is yes, but I hope I'm answering the question that you were trying to get to, is like, hey, can I still do the native stuff without Docker in the build packs? Yes, you can now with Spring Boot 2.7 and Spring Native. You can still generate that binary file that will work on that operating system and architecture. And Spring Boot 3, you can do that same thing using that native profile that's built in.
Let me ask you a quick question. So we generate an executable. I'm sure that can run almost anywhere, but is there ever a scenario where I would generate an executable and then build a container from that?
Yeah.
Is there,
yeah.
what is the reason behind that?
Yeah. Again, so this is why we kind of come to the head. Like, you can do it, but why? One of the things that I always credit really Cora is, like, containers are the new, like, artifact. Container images are the new artifact. So why would you build a Docker file by hand when you could use a build pack? The value of using a build pack, for example, is if I didn't specify a Docker image, but I now have an OCI compliant image. If something is to change, I'm confident that if there's a CVE released in any of the things that were a part of that build pack, that's part of the upstream. That's part of what I'm getting from Paketo, is that those build packs are being maintained instead of me. I could certainly, and I've done that. I have the scar tissue of creating my own build packs, my own Docker files to say, oh, I want to do this and I want to optimize my JVM for this, and I can change the size. And that was another question we had last week that I I did verify and have the answer for is I can pass in different. Let me go to, I think it's in Paketo. I can pass in different arguments to the builder via the environment to say, hey, I want to change any of the JVM arcs. I want to change the amount of memory, all my XX. I want to change the amount of memory that's passed in to that artifact that's getting generated. I believe that was from the same person. And I'm Madi, I don't know how to say it, and I apologize. Danish, I believe it was the same question or same person that asked that last week, is I can pass in and configure beyond the defaults that are set up. But I will say that the build packs have tons of expertise over years from not just Heroku, but also Pivotal and now VMware Tanzu, and people like Daniel Makusa that have been doing nothing but optimizing these and creating these build packs for us so that we don't ever have to worry about creating our own Docker files and we can have confidence. And then as we go forward, when we're using Spring, things like Tanzu Build Service or Azure Spring Apps, and we're taking these things to production, if there is a CVE, I should probably draw this. With these build packs, okay, that's our file, and that file gets put into these layers. We have our operating system, that base, and then we have a runtime, and then our app. So here's a double pointed example. I can have that base operating system and architecture. I could have JVM, 17.x. If there's a problem with this layer, if there's a CVE with this layer, and I'm using something like Azure Spring Apps, I can redeploy all of those containers. I don't have to rebuild the whole thing because they are OCI compliant and they're made with these build packs. It can actually just replace that one layer at runtime across the enterprise.
That's the layer I want to focus on. I guess my part of that question was, when we build an image, we're building this image that has the operating system, the Java runtime, the app.
Yeah.
But when I have a native app, I don't have the Java runtime.
Right.
Would I ever take a native app and put that into a container? Or is there no point in doing that since it can already run natively?
Yeah, so that's what I'm doing right here. I took the native app and I put it into an OCI compliant image, because what if the CVE isn't here? What if the CVE is here?
Gotcha.
Right? What if the CVE is here and I've got tens of thousands of these deployed to production? So let's get rid of this. Let's just talk about the native example. Hey, this is my app and whatever else. We don't need those. Let's just take that example. And like, hey, yeah, it's my native binary. But remember, that binary is for architecture and operating system.
Yep.
So I can build these things on a Windows machine to run on a Linux operating system.
Right.
Or other way around. And when I deploy them, if I'm using build packs, getting those OCI compliant images, the maintenance of that becomes even more trivial than, hey, let's go rebuild all of the images that we've built for that one CVE. Hey, can you say hi? Hi. All right. Hi. I'm on the show. So can I have you guys stay downstairs? You got to be super quiet. Okay. So hopefully, did that answer your question, Dan?
Yes.
Excellent. So I think the next question is like, hey, can I use a private registry for pulling those base images for build packs instead of? Absolutely. You can modify those build packs. You can make your own custom build pack, and you can generate code on whatever you need, and then some, right? If you are a platform engineer and you want to add your own agents or your own certificates to everything that goes out the door, you can do that at the build pack layer. And we could definitely jump into some of that if you'd like. That would be a really, really fun discussion. Maybe something better for like a code session, but I'm happy to jump back onto that. And let's see, the first question is in context of Kubernetes moving away from Docker Shim. Oh yeah, you're good. You don't have to worry about those OCI compliant images. are going to work on Kubernetes. The ones that I'm generating on this machine, and one of the things that I did earlier is I can make this for other architectures as well. We talked about the memory utilization and being able to save, uh, you know, up to 50% on your memory utilization. But if you're someplace like AWS where they've got ARM64 VMs, the number of uh, VMs, the stuff that you're putting, let's say it's got 4 CPUs and 24 gigs of RAM. That same VM in AMD versus ARM64 in AWS, for example, the ARM64 image is, I think, 30% cheaper. So on top of the what we saved for all those apps running on those VMs, the infrastructure is going to cost you less. So you have tons of options. Yes, you can run this on Kubernetes. Those OCI compliant images are going to be a part of your future. They are the new artifact. What else do we got? Is there any other good Anbu answered a question for us? Yep, they're producing. Yep, at the end it's OCI compliant. Thank you for answering the question. And yes, we're good. All right, I feel like we're good. I'm going to try to scroll down. Did you see any other good questions?
We have. Did we just do this one? Is there any benchmarking results? JVM or native version of Spring Boot 3, especially real life examples. I'm sure you could find them, but again, this is the classic. It depends
This is a great
because
question.
certain workloads are going to be better fit for the JVM. Certain workloads will be better fit for native images, right?
So in case you got here late, we showed just the startup time. And the startup time was hundreds of milliseconds faster using native. Now, the magic here is the JVM is powerful. Java's a great language. The JVM is even greater. Like, it's amazing. And it can do a lot of things for your code at runtime. So it depends is the answer. Different workloads are going to behave differently. Oops, sorry, my phone was blowing off here. Different workloads behave differently. So there's not like a blanket statement that says this is the better. It depends on the workload. It depends on the workload. But again, if you've got tests for your workloads, you're going to be in a much better position moving forward. Don't you need the container image to deploy onto some cloud host? It's not enough to just have the native app, right? So again, the container image, that OCI compliant image, that will allow me to deploy to something like a Docker or a Kubernetes or a Containerd or some service like Azure Spring Apps. The native app, that static binary, that can only be used for the operating system and architecture that it was created for. So I could give you, we were talking earlier about the CLI. We can make these native CLIs and I can deploy those CLIs, Spring Boot, Spring Shell, native CLIs. I can compile them natively and I can deploy one for Darwin Intel and Darwin ARM64, and I can deploy one for Linux Intel and Linux ARM64, and I will have these different native apps statically linked binary apps that I can put onto my GitHub releases and make them available for the different distributions.
Yeah, and if you have access to a raw box, I mean, and on AWS, Microsoft, Azure or Google Cloud, you can just throw those on there. But yes, generally you're going to take that, put it in a container, and that's how you can get it up to one of the easier ways to kind of deploy something, right?
Yeah. I saw one of these other. Is there a recipe for Java 11 to Java 17? I'm pretty sure that there is, and I am a big fan of Open Rewrite. I will follow up on that and get you updated. I definitely know where to go for any Open Rewrite questions. And I'm pretty sure that I think even beyond Open Rewrite, I think it's included in a lot of the IDEs already. There's a plugin that says, "Oh, I see that you're using Java 11 things and you have a Java 17." So yeah.
And so Spring, the Spring Migrator just had another release that is constantly getting updated. That uses Open Rewrite underneath the hoods. There are going to be some sessions at Spring 1 about that. So definitely check out that project if you're interested in migrating Spring projects. I know that uses it underneath the hood, and maybe you could pick some stuff up underneath there. I'm sure they're doing some type of migrations from different versions of Java as well. So check that out.
Yeah, so I'm trying to scroll through. Thanks everybody for joining, and I feel like the time just really flew, or maybe I just was going really, really slow.
I know.
But there's lots of stuff. I'm trying to catch up. Uh, we will be back next week and talking about taking Spring to production, and we can talk about some of the stuff that we've just. We'll follow up with some of the stuff we've done today. Yes, Spring Shell native. We will have a show here for that real soon.
We're getting
we are
closer to that. Yep.
getting rid of all the bash, converting it all to Spring Shell. And I think that you are in the same spot. You would like to have a framework and that knowledge to do all the things that you know how to do without having like how do I do that in bash again?
Yeah.
I'm going to assume you're an amazing, smart person, Ted. But yeah, I think you'd like to do things in Spring as well. Thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
This has been good. Thanks for all of the great questions. Hopefully we helped a few of you out, and yeah, we gave you a little bit of insight, answered questions, and we're ready. I've written more bash than I ever want to do again. Yes. Oh, I mean, that's how we got here with the internet. We held it up with bash and duct tape. But now we can do better. I think we can do better. We'll use Spring Shell.
Cool. So as always, your questions, we tried to get to a lot of them today. If you have more questions about the stuff we talked about today or stuff that you have seen on a previous episode, please get those questions to us. You can find us on Twitter. I have a list of growing questions that we are going to get to. I'm going to find a way to kind of I think I'm going to put this in like a GitHub discussion or something, because I know we've had people like Ted has reached out to me and offered to help answer some of those questions. A lot of these questions are just something I just can't give an answer to right away. They involve a little more research, or somebody who's dealt with those specific things a lot more than I have, somebody like Ted. So I'm going to find a way to kind of get the community involved, and we'll start picking some of those questions off in our shows when we need to. So keep those questions coming, even if we can't get to them right away, we are tracking them. We will get to those questions, promise. So with that, great show. Look forward to next week, Spring to Production. Join us next Tuesday at 3:30 EDT, 2:30 Kansas City time. On Tuesday, October 11th for Spring to Production. So bring your questions. If you've ever wondered, how do I get this app into production? We're going to talk a lot about that. And we'll hopefully have a whole bunch of information to share on Tuesday. So thanks everyone for coming. We appreciate it. And we will see you next week.
Thanks. See ya.